Good morning, Madam Ambassador, dear Minister, Your Excellencies, and dear guests. Nice to see you all here. It is my pleasure to welcome you all to our 18th Helvi Sipilä seminar, Gender Responsive Budgeting in Raising Women from Poverty, the core tool to Gender Equal Future. I am Dr. Jutta Hartikainen, coordinator of this seminar, and I am first Vice President and Coordinator of International Relations of the Finnish Federation of Graduate Women. I will also be the co-host of this seminar with Anne Pönni from YWCA. Anne, please.
Thank you, Jutta. Good morning to everyone and a warm welcome to this Helvi Sipilä seminar also on my behalf. My name is Anne Pönni and I am the General Secretary in Young Women's Christian Association, YWCA of Finland. We are altogether five Finnish women's organizations arranging this seminar. In addition to our organizations, the Coalition of Finnish Women's Associations, NYTKIS, UN Women Finland, and the National Council of Women in Finland have been working together to make this event happen. And a special thank to our partner, the Permanent Mission of Finland to the UN, and Ambassador Elina Kalppu, the Permanent Representative for the UN, for this beautiful venue and for your support in arranging this seminar. And we also want to express our gratitude for support for Rwanda. It is now my pleasure to introduce the first speaker, Minister of Equality and Social Security, Sanni Grahn-Laasonen, from the Ministry of Social Affairs and Health in the Finnish government. Welcome, Madam Minister, to open the 18th International Helvi Sipilä Seminar on Gender Responsive Budgeting in Raising Women from Poverty, the core tool for Gender Equal Future. The floor is yours, Madam Minister.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. Great pleasure to be here opening this 18th International Helvi Sipilä Seminar on Gender Responsive Budgeting, organized by the Coalition of the Finnish Women's Associations. And I want to thank the organizers for all the work you've done, and also this is a great moment for us to celebrate and remember Helvi Sipilä. Helvi Sipilä, the very first, world's first women Assistant Secretary General of the UN, powerful Finnish woman. I find it extremely important to discuss gender responsive budgeting and learn from different experiences. In Finland, we see gender responsive budgeting as part of our wider efforts of mainstreaming the gender perspective. Our aim is to recognize, improve, develop and evaluate policy processes to incorporate gender equality perspective in all policies at all levels and at all stages by all actors involved. This includes budgetary processes. This is not only a political goal, but a legal obligation. Our gender equality law states that all public administration bodies are obligated to promote gender equality actively and systematically. Gender mainstreaming and gender responsive budgeting is only possible when we have gender disaggregated statistics and data available. We need to collect the information disaggregated by sex and also remember to analyze the data with a gender perspective. Let me share a few concrete examples of our national efforts. We've had guidelines on gender impact assessment since 2003. We have created instructions on gender mainstreaming to support legislative drafting. For example, according to these instructions, gender impacts must be explained in all legislative proposals given by the government. The general directives of the Ministry of Finance for formulating the budget state that the line ministries' budget proposals must present those activities that have significant gender impacts. We have e-learning tool on gender equality and non-discrimination for civil servants, and we also organize regular meetings with the budgetary officials and the gender equality focal points of different line ministries. This all we have in paper at least, and we're constantly developing the process to be very well organized when it comes to gender equality and gender mainstreaming. We've developed our national gender budgeting since 2004. We first piloted with the budget of our own Ministry of Social Affairs and Health. Then we realized that it's necessary for the Ministry of Finance to be in charge of the gender budgeting process. We had lengthy negotiations between the Ministry of Social Affairs and Health, which is in charge of gender equality policy and where government gender equality unit is situated, and the Ministry of Finance. Our priority was to have a gender perspective mainstreamed in the budget itself, and not, for example, only as an attachment to it, like in some other countries. As a result, since 2006, all ministries are obligated to indicate in their budget proposals any actions that have significant gender-related impacts. The Gender Equality Unit in my Ministry of Social Affairs and Health supports the ministries in the implementation of the budget planning and monitors these summaries every year. This is still, but there is still room for improvement, and we have started a project to further develop this system. We have learned that these processes take time. One important lesson learned is that gender budgeting has to be fitted in the national budgetary system. Cooperation between gender equality specialists and budget specialists is absolutely necessary. In addition, support and commitment from the political leaders is necessary, and the legal basis has to be solid. In Finland, the responsibility of the development of gender budgeting has shifted from gender equality policy towards the budget ministry and all the line ministries. Gender budgeting is visible and available within the budget book and not as an attachment. Finally, I want to raise that I'm very concerned with the growing resistance, regression and pushback taking place globally against gender equality, women and girls' rights, and equal rights for the LGBTI persons. We have to continuously work hard to safeguard universal human rights and gender equality, to leave no one behind, to value diversity and belonging, and to stand up against discrimination. Gender-responsive budgeting can be one of the ways to do this, and I'm very much looking forward to this discussion today, and thank you once again for the organization.
Thank you so much, Minister Grahn-Laasonen, of your excellent points and opening of this seminar, and the many valuable points you raised up. It's really much appreciated. And as a researcher, it's always heartwarming hearing how data is used in base of the decision making. Thank you from that one as well. Next, it's my absolute pleasure to introduce you to our keynote speaker. She is an author and a founder of a UN Women Core Tool for Gender Equal Future, just to mention a few of her many merits. She is a senior policy advisor, governance and national planning of UN Women. Sohra Khan, please, stage is yours.
Thank you very much, and it's always such a pleasure to be at the Finnish mission, mostly for the view. I'm sure you all would appreciate that, but for lots of other things, including the partnership. And thank you so much for the generous introduction. So it's my absolute pleasure, Excellencies, distinguished participants, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, to give this keynote address on this incredibly important topic of gender responsive budgeting and its connection to women's poverty. I'd of course like to thank the organisers for inviting UN Women to participate. Distinguished guests, we have heard several times during the CSW that the world is at a critical juncture. Countries are facing multiple intersecting crises with highly divergent economic recovery paths. They are under intense pressure to mobilise domestic resources to finance their national development objectives and policies, whilst contending with very constrained fiscal space. We have also heard from the Secretary General's report that women are disproportionately impacted by the crises, the intersecting crises. Over 10.3% of women currently live in extreme poverty, and we also know that women in conflict situations are almost 8 times more likely to live in extreme poverty, with heightened food insecurity and increased risk of violence. The Minister has already mentioned this, but multiple intersecting forms of discrimination actually intensify women's poverty. So discrimination against the lines of race, ethnicity, disability, location, sexual orientation and gender identity often lock women and girls in a vicious cycle of inequality and economic deprivation and increased levels of violence. So it is incredibly important at this seminar and in the context of the current CSW to be unpacking some of these issues, because it is especially in times of crisis that women and girls living in poverty become what we call the shock absorbers of the systemic failures that we see in our economies and societies today. And often this is in the form of extended unpaid labour and unpaid care work in the home. So what is critical right now is that governments shape their policies, their institutions and their systems to close some of these gender gaps and to advance their national gender equality goals. This requires strengthening their laws and policies and effectively targeting resources for their implementation. One such strategy is the use of the fiscal system to support achievement of gender equality and women's empowerment. So gender responsive budgeting provides the strategic policy approach for assessing the gender impacts of the budget and targets public resources to address gender inequalities. Excellencies, you know that UN Women and its predecessor UN Women have more than 2 decades of experience supporting governments in advancing gender responsive budgeting. And this work has contributed globally to enormous progress, including methodological advances, greater understanding of what works well and also what doesn't work well. But it has also underscored the importance of this work and the relevance of this work to all types of economies, whether they're advanced economies or developing economies or middle-income countries. In 2023 alone, UN Women supported over 60 countries to include gender equality in their financing strategies, to design and implement gender-responsive budgets, and to strengthen gender mainstreaming in public finance. And a significant portion of our work is around strengthening available data globally. So as part of this and in line with our obligations around SDG monitoring, we, along with our sister agencies, UNDP and the OECD, have developed an international methodology on GRB as part of the SDG monitoring framework. So as you all know, the 5th SDG is on women's empowerment and gender equality, and within that there is a target 5C that speaks to laws and policies that governments need to adopt in order to advance gender equality. In fact, and I want to read this, the target is, it calls on member states to adopt and strengthen sound policies and legislation for gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls at all levels. The indicator that measures this target is indicator 5C1, and this indicator looks at the systems that governments have in place to realize this. So how do they track allocations, public allocations to gender equality, and how do they make that data available to the public? And I must add that out of all the fiscal indicators in the SDG framework, this is the only fiscal indicator that links resources and money to implementations of policies and plans. So it's very significant in that sense. It has three main criteria. The first is we assess the policy framework of a country and look at whether sufficient resources are actually being put forward to be allocated to gender equality and women's empowerment. The second criteria is looking at the public finance management system. So really looking at what kinds of mechanisms are put in place, and these vary from gender tagging, gender, ex-ante gender impact assessments, and so on and so forth. And then the third criteria, and this is very important, is looking at how governments then make that data available to the public so that citizens are able to assess where their money is going and how governments are allocating resources and also what they're prioritizing. So what have we learned? So we've had 2 rounds of reporting so far. We've had one in 2018 and one in 2021, and we've just kicked off the 3rd round now. So we have data from 105 countries and areas across the world, and we found that globally, of these 105 countries, 26% meet all of those criteria that I just mentioned. So 26% of countries of the 105, so these are countries that have reported on this SDG, have systems in place to track resource allocations for gender budgets. So the second, I think, major advancement for us has been 59% of countries within this group, so 60% of countries, whilst they don't meet all the criteria, meet a number of the criteria, and their systems have been improving over time. So it is incredibly important that countries report against this indicator, because then you're able to track progress. But it does show that there's this global push towards gender budgeting, not just as an advocacy tool anymore and talking about the importance of it, but really making the changes in public finance management systems that are needed to make sure that ultimately gender budgeting results in impact. So there is a difference in the lives of women and girls. So analysis of this data shows where we as UN Women need to work harder and put more effort, how we need to support governments, and indeed where the gaps are and where some of the weak points are. So I think what is incredibly important in terms of an overall picture of this is that countries generally have good laws and policies, but not enough resources. PFM systems are generally good, but not systematic in how they track resources across the entire budget cycle. And transparency is weak, which limits scrutiny and oversight of the budget. So what do we need to improve? Well, we have a couple of ideas. I think the first thing, and the Minister mentioned it already, is legislative grounding. So having GRB baked into some kind of legal framework is incredibly important. And we've seen that in the 26% range, most countries have a law on GRB. So having this ensures that the practice becomes part of the institutional DNA of the organization, and it supports its implementation even if there is political change. So it's baked in, and it's very difficult to reverse that. So that's the first thing. The second is effective GRB requires a whole of government approach. So it's not just about a particular ministry, or indeed just the Ministry of Finance. In many countries we see the Ministries of Finance issue budget guidelines, and I think that's where the work stops. It doesn't. You really have to look at how that translates into sectoral plans, what that means in terms of, and even at the local government, but what that means in terms of actual policies and programs that are going to drive us towards closing some of the gender gaps that the country might have. So a whole of government approach and coordination is incredibly important. So in many countries there's a lack of coordination amongst ministries, but also for us with development partners, with civil society, and with parliamentarians. These are incredibly important actors on gender responsive budgeting. A third area is, of course, technical capacities, so having the strong technical capacities within the government, and this really helps to identify gender policy objectives, conduct gender analysis of plans and budgets, and makes it easier to align public resources with gender equality. But sustaining these capacities takes investment, time, and consistent support. So you need clear and comprehensive guidance within ministries to make sure that people working within these ministries, staff, actually have the tools and the capacities and so on to do their job effectively. It needs to mean something in their day-to-day work. The next area is around accountability. So it's very important to have strong accountability mechanisms. And we need accountability mechanisms because that's how we evaluate whether the commitments we're making actually have been met and whether they're making a difference in women's lives. And our data shows that the evaluations of gender impacts of the budget are often not implemented. So underscoring the need to really strengthen this area. And then finally, timely and accessible data and information. It's key for accountability, and it's key to identify what the necessary improvements are that you need to make. The consistent collection and presentation of gender budget data enhances our understanding of how resources are used and where gaps lie. So just a couple of points in conclusion. The indicator that we've developed is an indicator that provides a standardized methodology for all countries. We know that countries have approached gender-responsive budgeting in different ways. And I think that's fine, but it makes it incredibly important to do any kind of comparison. So the indicator allows us to have a global sense of what is happening in terms of how we're advancing gender equality. The indicator also allows countries to improve their public finance management systems over time. So it's not an either or. It really is a step-by-step process, noting that these things don't happen overnight. Gender budgeting certainly isn't an overnight exercise. We've been doing it for many, many years, and we're learning every single day. Improving oversight mechanisms is another big gap. So working with audit institutions, parliaments, and civil societies. Evaluating the impact of gender-responsive budgeting. We all, the converted in this room, we know the importance of the tool, we know that it has transformative potential and so on, but there's scant evidence of what actual impact it makes to people's lives. Are there more resources being allocated to particular gender gaps? Is it making a difference to people? Is it reaching people? So that whole area of impact. More and better data. We need data. We need more countries to be reporting on this indicator. We have 105 countries now. We'd like to have a global sample. And in our sample we have, as I said, advanced economies, middle-income countries, low-income countries. So it really allows us to tailor technical assistance. And then finally, a gap that we see in the work is work on taxation. So there's a lot of work that's been done on spend and expenditure policy, and we think that's, of course, absolutely critical. But more and more we find that on that first criteria that looks at whether there are policies and laws in place and whether they're allocating sufficient resources, countries are just not mobilizing the resources that they need to do effective gender budgeting. So gender budgeting fails. Why? Because we think we have a law, we have a policy, it should work. No, it needs resources. It needs resources, and that's where you need to look at domestic resource mobilization and how the tax system is structured, the biases in the tax system, how those can be corrected. And there's a lot of new work now that UNDP and others are doing around this area, and indeed UN Women as well. So I think that's a huge gap that we need to fill in order to increase the pie and the kind of pool of resources that we have for gender responsive budgeting. So moving forward at UN Women, we will continue to enhance reporting by countries. We want to have a robust database of GRB experience that can inform our collective experience and improve gender responsive fiscal policies and laws. And we're very excited about that. So I thank you for your attention and for the opportunity to share, and look forward to this session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jorka Khan, for your excellent keynote. It was interesting to hear that 105 countries are already reporting, and I got 5 points from their legal framework, everybody on board, technical capacity, accountability, and data. These are the facts that count. Unfortunately, I have heard that you cannot stay with us the rest of the seminars. Okay, it has changed. Okay, thank you. That's a good news. That's a good news. Yeah. We will now move to our next program item, which is the discussion on this topic. And we will have 4 excellent ladies here whom I will now introduce and welcome you to come to the podium. We have 2 co-hosts. First one is Inka Hopsu, the chair of the Coalition of Finnish Women Associations, NYTKIS, and a member of Finnish Parliament. Welcome, Inka.
Thank you.
And the co-host is Hanna-Mari Manninen, the chair of UN Women Finland and attorney at law. Welcome, Hanna-Mari. And then we welcome Mrs. Nadine Umutoni-Katsinsi, the Chief Gender Monitor from the government of Rwanda. Welcome, Nadine. And then Zohra, welcome on board to continue discussion. We are now ready, and if time allows, in the end of the discussion period, we will have a time for your questions as well.
So good morning, everyone. We are not in Africa. Good morning.
Good morning.
This is a panel where me and Hanna-Mari, we get to ask the questions. When I got elected to the parliament, some senior, more experienced parliament members, they told me that it's one of the main tasks that you have, that you can ask the questions. You really can do that. And we have heard during this week a lot of discussions about gender-responsive budgeting, but maybe still to go back to the basics and first to start asking, what does it actually mean, how does it work, and which countries actually are implementing, or some examples, and so right, you can start.
Thank you so much for the question. I think that I had mentioned 105 countries, and these are countries that just report on the SDG indicator. There are way more countries that don't report on the SDG indicator that do gender budgeting. So I think it's definitely over about 120 countries right now, and that's just phenomenal because when it started many years ago, it was with a pilot project with 10 countries. And Morocco was one of those countries. I believe Rwanda might have been one of those countries, an early adopter of gender-responsive budgeting, and it's taken off. But in a nutshell, what it is integrating a gender equality perspective in the budget process, with the objective of having positive gender outcomes for women and girls.
Great, that's very clear. And great to be here as well. We are very happy to have also Nadine here. Thank you very much. Yes, and we've heard about Rwanda's successful implementation of gender responsive budgeting. So can you maybe tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, thank you, and thank you, Excellencies. It's a pleasure to be here. Well, success, we are still also having our own challenges, but true that Rwanda adopted the GRB, that's how we call it, the gender responsive budgeting earlier on. We had our organic law on public finances since 2013. It was revised in 2022. And this law requires the Minister of Finance to submit what we call a budget framework paper, a BFP. And this BFP needs to have a gender budget statement. That's in the law, and not only for the bigger budget paper, but also each ministry, each budget agency has to have their own budget statement included in their budget, and this is submitted to the Parliament. And then the parliament will have a committee in charge of budget and patrimony, and then and we are lucky to have 61% of parliamentarian women, and this helps a lot when they look at the budget and they look at the gender budget statement and see if it is really responding to the requirements that is there. So that is, I would say, the legal framework. But at the same time, as you heard, we have those institutional framework. Also at the top is the Minister of Finance. They are the one in charge of making sure that this law is well implemented. And then we have our office, the Gender Monitoring Office. The Gender Monitoring Office, I think you talked about, very important to monitor what is, you can have the budget well written, but nothing is happening on ground. So our role is really to go back to the ministries, agencies, but also districts, the local government, to look at how they have implemented their gender budget statements, if they have responded to the needs that are there, and then report back now to the committee in the parliament, and showing each and every institution when they come to define their budget in front of the committee. There is always a person from our office, the General Monitoring Office, telling them, yes, you're saying this, but you didn't build a market that will help women not to go very far from selling their fruits and everything. But that's what we have planned. That's an example. So this monitoring and this accountability helps a lot. They always go back and then change what they have done. So in a few, that's how we are doing it, but we still have also challenges when we come back on that.
Yeah, that's a good example for us. Or maybe you have a chance to say something about the challenges as well.
Oh yes. Some already said. First of all, again, the law, as I mentioned above, requires all institutions to conduct what we call a situation analysis. So and plan, because you budget what you have planned for. So this situation analysis requires that those who are doing the situation analysis have the capacity, because not everyone is able to see the gaps when it comes to gender equality, especially when you are in agriculture and infrastructure. You have your own competing priorities. It doesn't come out with it. So the issue of capacity, I think we are still to have well done situation analysis and well done planning. And this is something we are still working on. Like with the UN Women, we used to train on GPME, the courses on GPME, and I think also I heard from Finland. We also the director of planning in all institutions are the focal person for the gender budget statements. So those are the ones who have been trained. So the training needs to be, I would say, recurrent, always there. The other thing is we have been working on this. It's a very bit of data, as you also mentioned that. As GMO, General Monitoring Office, we have what we call the Gender Management Information System, where we collect data to show the progress in different sectors, and we work closely with our National Institute of Statistics. But again, sometimes the data we get are not well done. So in terms of data, it's very important. But what we have already is very good, and we appreciate it. So thank you.
Thank you. The topic of this CSW meeting has been the poverty of women, and it's been said many times that the poverty has female face. Have you been able to measure the impacts to the women's poverty of the gender budgeting? So this is the question for both of you. Maybe you can start.
Thank you very much. Yes, well, the measurements, as I was saying, we have those data from the statistics. But the good thing is we are like as Rwanda to have a very, say, I think Mr. President, or who is very, very good at understanding that it's very important to take care of women. And again, 51% of our population are women. So he always says that how can you do poverty alleviation, social protection programs without taking care of the 51% of the population. So that make it everything more or less smooth for ensuring that women are alleviated from poverty. But we have different programs on social protection. One comes in my mind immediately is well, it's in Rwanda. We call it a Vision program. It's a program that is there to social protection programs that supports most vulnerable households, and the statistics again shows that the female-headed households are the most poor, as you see it, and we have different programs like direct support to those households. We have what we call public works. Public works, there are simple works that is being done by the members of those households that are poor, and to allow them to gain some salaries. And we have what we call public works, and we have what we call extended public works. So public works was for everyone, everyone, men, women, disabled, youth who are coming from poor households. And then the Social Security, the Social Protection Ministry realized that women, because of the paid care work, they are not attending to the works, or they are not working long hours as the others, so they were not gaining money. So they come up with an innovation on extended public works that really was catering for those who have caring responsibility. Few men were there, but also men. So the extended public works benefit 75% of those who are in extended public works are women. If I also look at public works, 52% are again women who are benefiting from this. And this VUP program has also financial services, and 52% again, financial services are owned to women. For that support, again, it is 73%. So to give this a simple example, social protection programs, they make sure that they really take care of women in households led by women.
I'm going to be a little bit provocative here, right? And that's why I wanted you to start, because it's practical, and Rwanda has done many practical things. I mean, the issues that poverty is multifaceted, it's multidimensional. And in the CSW, it was very clear, even from the SG's report, that it depends on where you are in society and where you're sitting. And it is intersectional. So how governments then design programs to eradicate poverty and end poverty, you really have to have all of those dimensions in mind. And gender responsive budgeting is not a quick fix solution or a magic bullet or silver bullet or whatever you want to call it. So what we have been trying to do is work with other institutions to measure impact, right? And we've seen studies from the IMF, for example, that show that with the introduction of gender responsive budgeting in India, that they have managed to increase girls' secondary school enrollment rates. And in Morocco, they've managed to decrease maternal mortality rates. So that's a phenomenal example. But we need more than that for women, right? We need the social protection, we need the social services, we need infrastructure. So for us, we always start at what are the national government's objectives that are outlined in the National Development Plan or strategy for gender equality. And it's all there. And then how do you go through that plan and then cost what is needed in terms of budget allocation? So the whole costing exercise becomes incredibly important. I'm sure you know better than me about the challenges of costing, because if you don't have the data, or your data is incomplete, then you don't have accurate assessments of what it would cost to implement certain programs. So I think, from the lens of poverty, it's important to look at exactly which groups of women and girls you're talking about and what their specific barriers are, and make sure that we're looking at all aspects of services and so on that they need in their lives to move out of poverty. Thanks.
Well, we know that women come from different backgrounds. So then the next question is, how is intersectionality taken into account in gender responsive budgeting? Is there any aspects of that?
I think there are more and more countries that are talking about it. I mean, certainly Canada, through the GDA Plus, the Gender Budget Analysis Plus, has been looking at issues of SOGI and so on, but it certainly isn't done in a systematic manner at all. And I think it's a big gap in the data, again, because if you don't know what people's needs are, and if you don't know what services are required, then it's very difficult to do that. So I think that's an area that for sure there needs to be much more thought and much more resources really allocated to connecting more complete data. But I think Canada is a great example of doing that at the moment.
Yeah, sure. Well, in Rwanda, again, all sectors, I would say the education sector, health sector, all the sectors are required to have what we call gender mainstreaming strategy at the beginning. So that's where we draw their plans, and that will be funded through the GRB. So far we have been able to have gender mainstreaming strategies around 14 out of 16 sectors, according to our national strategy for transformation. And this is helping a lot. And again, when you talk about data, it's very important to have data. And well, the statistics, our national institute of Rwanda produce those data, but sometimes we find out the sectors are not using them as it should be. As I said, they will have those competing. You're in agriculture, you want to manage the climate change in agriculture, but you don't think that the beneficiaries, the majority are women, doesn't come out quickly. And I think that's why we need to make more efforts so that we have tools, but how to make them work and produce impact we expect is very important. But I would say that the gender mainstreaming strategy is very important, and also what I talked about on situation analysis, and then coming out with clear output activities and also indicators, and at the end monitor the whole process and how it is creating impact on the ground. So
Thank you. When I turn to Inga, we heard and we know that you're also a member of the parliament in Finland, and we would now like to hear the policy makers' views. So how does gender responsive budgeting look like from a policymaker's perspective in Finland and maybe overall?
Yeah, maybe. First, of course, it seems something that we really need to aim to take place. And I come from the opposition, and our minister spoke very nicely how it's done in Finland, but maybe still some criticism is allowed.
In a democracy.
Exactly. And I think we both want that we have the ambition level. We have the gender mainstreaming in our legislation in Finland, but many times it feels that gender budgeting is also their kind of a demand, and when the ministers they do their budget process, and in the end they do the text that how does this affect to the women, and what kind of gender equality changes will the budget make. But many times it feels that it's kind of a copy-paste exercise. What has done previous years, the same text appears to be there the next year. And I would really like to change the process to work on the other way around, that you first consider the effects and then do the budgeting. And this is, my background is in the development work. I worked in FCA before, Finnish, before I became a member of parliament. And there it was very, very clear that we looked at gender markers, we looked at climate markers, we really aim to make difference to the, and to reach the SDGs. But for somehow when we are doing the Finnish budgeting, we are not doing this so clearly. And of course many of our services are offered in the local level, in the municipalities, and in districts now there's also health services. And there I think the knowledge, you spoke very well, that we need resources and we need knowledge. The civil servants, individual civil servants actually affect a lot at what kind of resource we have. So I don't want our society to be like a, how to say, sleeping beauty, screaming that we have already so many female politicians and we are doing the equality issues so well here in Finland. There are active anti-gender movements, there are backlashes also in our society, and we need to keep the ambitious level. And maybe I put it back to you, Mari. How could the civil society actually help us policymakers? How could you challenge us more?
That's a good question, because we do need to challenge you all, and we also need to challenge ourselves, because I actually think that we are not doing enough today. And if there's one word that's been repeated here, that's pushback, and we need to push back the pushback. I think that's for sure. Then, well, the minister said it, and you said it. There are many tools we can also advance and lobby for. And as I'm a lawyer by background, so of course, introducing laws, what we can do by the legal means. So that's one thing. And then political will, that's for sure. And also this whole government approach that's been introduced by UN Women. So I think that's important. And then cooperation. I don't know if you've heard the name corporates here and the private sector, but we do need them here as well. And then the cooperation with civil society overall, so that's important. And if I still add one aspect, so that would be individuals. So we need each and everyone. We need the officials who are actually doing the work. So they need to be aware of gender responsive budgeting and be able to introduce their ideas and put them forward.
Thank you. Any comments? Does it sound familiar? Is this type of discussion going on?
No, it sounds it resonates and it definitely sounds very familiar. But I was thinking when you mentioned individuals, I was thinking about the importance of using citizen-generated data on service delivery. And we've seen many countries, especially in the global south, use those as a form of data. So in my own country, in South Africa, there's ways in which you can report on an app on your mobile, whether you're receiving a particular service or not. And the International Budget Group has been pioneering some of these approaches because we always complain about lack of data. And so how do we make sure that we get, maximize and get data from as many sources as possible? And what better data than from citizens themselves and people who are experiencing these services? And I think that's been a very, very good and useful innovation on gender budgeting.
Yeah, data definitely pushes the policymakers as well. When you see the numbers, whether you have results or whether you actually have the pushback situation.
Yeah, I wanted to build on what you said, and I think as you heard in Rwanda, the law is more for the public institution, but as you said, we need to bring on board the private sector and the civil society. And in Rwanda, we have started an initiative with the support from UNDP on the gender equality seal for private sector and financial institution, and now we are going towards the SMEs that employees have many women, so to make sure that they are also mainstreaming gender in what they are doing, and they're also budgeting for that, because the private sector is on the side and they think that they're not concerned. So the GMO, the General Monitoring Office, with the Private Sector Federation, we have been working on this, and it is really creating impact you can already see. And with that, we have been able to have more than 6 women heading banks and financial institutions, and they're not only heading them, but they're also making changes to ensure that women also have access to, they are financially included when it comes to. So this is really helping a lot, and they are going towards also the civil society. They can make us accountable, but they need also to make sure that they are mainstreaming gender in their implementation, in their activities they're doing it. So this is the next step. So yeah.
I think we can skip my question and go to yours next question, because otherwise we don't have any time for the questions.
That's true, and we do want some concrete examples here. So the question goes, if a country or city has not yet implemented gender responsive budgeting methods, so what should be done? So some concrete examples, how to advance or lobby for gender responsive budgeting.
I think we must remember how gender responsive budgeting started to answer that question, and really started with civil society. So it was feminist economists and civil society organizations really pushing governments to think about the budget. And the 3 kind of grandmothers of gender budgeting, as I always call them, Diane Elson, Rhonda Sharp, and Debbie Budlinder, in Australia, the UK, and in South Africa, were really instrumental in driving that process, because they used the avenues that they had as feminist economists to really put pressure on governments in those respective countries. And you remember Australia had it in the 80s, and then South Africa had it after apartheid, and the Women's Budget Group in the UK is very instrumental in holding the UK government to account for some of its austerity policies that it's been adopting recently. So I think that we have to start with people, and as you said, individual civil society and so on, to pressure governments into doing this. in order for GRB not to be like fashionable and a fad, because there are many countries that are adopting it and then realizing, well, no, it's actually a lot of work. It's not just, you know, about just having a policy in place or even a law in place, but it really is about systemic change. And systemic change takes time. You need good partnerships, and the partnerships need to be with civil society, with the private sector and so on. So I think there's two things. One is it hasn't started to mobilize for it to start, and civil society organizations are really good with this. But sometimes women's organizations don't want to touch fiscal policy because they think, oh no, it's a bit too complicated. It isn't. And so you need to tap into the resources that are available. And feminist economists are you know, a great resource for us. And then the other is to, you know, at the partnership angle, to make sure that you're bringing everyone along with you and not trying to do this yourself.
And just a few, I think you touched everything, but what I want to say is that, especially for countries like Rwanda who are still developing, it is very important that to be able to meet your targets and what you want, to invest in women. They are the majority of the population, cannot reduce poverty without looking at women and all other targets you might think of. So it is very important to understand that in terms of governance of the countries, to understand that's very important. And secondly, once it's there, very important, the capacity building you talked about. I think we need to make sure that across all the government agencies, to be able to mainstream gender and have the GRB being productive is make sure that everybody understands the importance, and that also requires the data, showing them the data that in agriculture you are saying they're doing well, but like in Rwanda, 77% of women are in subsistence agriculture, and the 51 population of 50% of your population. So you're not doing well, even though you say that you have hit the target, but in your sense. So the data, the capacity building, but also understand that development cannot happen without really taking care of women. Thank you.
Thank you. Here we got some very good concrete examples.
I think we have time for one or two questions from the floor. Just raise your hand. Yes, please stand up. And I don't know if you have mic. You can come a bit front. Thank you.
Good morning. Yeah, I don't have a question, but I just want to share our experience from Ethiopian civil society. I am a from Union of Ethiopian Women and Children Associations. First of all, I want to thank the organizers and the teachers and congratulate Rwanda for implementing the responsibility that is a key tool for women empowerment and breaking the finances. From our organization's experience, we are implementing gender responsibility in partnership with the Union of Ethiopian Women and with the UN Women. So what we are doing to make accountable the government and bring the women's need priority to the planning and applying budget. You see, we established social accountability committee at grassroots level that comprises women, people with disabilities, people with HIV/AIDS, aged people, youth, all segments of the community. Then we discuss interface meeting so as they can give us their prior needs to be included in the planning and budgeting of the public finance process. Then, taking the priority of the community, we conduct interface meeting with the governments, so as to look at how they allocate budget for the basic needs or the needs, how they include the basic needs of the community in the planning and budgeting of the basic services like education, water, health, rural agricultural services, all proper sectors. Then, after we conduct interface meeting with the government, we develop joint action plan. Joint action plan that includes the member of the UN and community as well. Then it's approved by the council of the county. In our case, that's the council authority. It is included in the budget. Then we monitor through the data we collect, citizen report we apply to collect. And also, this is what we are doing with the financial support from the UN we have, of course, sustainability. If we want Azalea away the community, we are also conducting media direct talk show for us to participate in the community, around the community. We go sometimes, are we talking about to allocate 50% of the revenue only? These are the points raised. So I just want to share it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Other comments? Do we have one? The short one. The short one, yeah. Go ahead.
Yes. Let's move on. Also, you can see.
That's good for the video.
Yes, good morning. My name is Vida. I'm from Tanzania. I'm the principal economist working in the Ministry of Finance. Yes. Maybe I want to share experience back home. We really don't have our GRB in place as a tangible document, but you are waiting for the backstage. So far in our budget line, we do have gender as cross-cutting issues, but back to me, I believe business of everybody belongs to nobody. So far, back home, we are trying to build our capacity building on the GRB through the UN Women to ensure that now we start to integrate GRB in our national budget. So here we are looking forward to get some more technical assistance to accomplish that GRB. But we are having experience. I'm working with I'm the program manager of Gender Transformative Action program, which is financed by European Union. That is gave us a good experience and lesson learned. They provide fund through the budget support, and we are having like 5 indicators we are tracking. So as a Ministry of Finance is to now to ensure that the indicators which are under that program are well allocated enough resources. The problem is we don't have GRB, so we are struggling to ensure how much we should give to the Ministry of Education for completion rates, how much we should give to Helvi for gender victims, how much to give to gender ministry. That is the problem. So we are looking forward to receive some technical assistance to accomplish the GRB so we can work it smoothly. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for all the comments. And thank you very much for our panelists for the great discussion and wise insights. Both Zona and Nadine, it was very much appreciated. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for our for your excellent discussion to Hanna-Mari Manninen, Inka Hopsu, Zohra Khan, and Nadine Umutoni-Kaczynski. You have raised up several points and gave us a lot to think about, and for many days after this one, because there were so many points that it needs to be thinking for a long time, and there was excellent points over there. Thank you so much. And then last but not by any means least, we have great pleasure to hear the closing remarks from a lady who has made it possible for us to have this seminar in this amazing place, and of course with the best view of New York as well. Let me welcome Madam Ambassador Elina Kauppu, Permanent Representative, Permanent Mission of Finland to UN, New York, Finnish government. Please, Madam Ambassador, the stage is yours.
Your Excellency, Minister for Gender Equality, and you all promoters of gender equality, as well as specialists on and friends of gender responsive budgeting. It is a great pleasure to thank you all for being here, for the presentators and the panel for excellent and fascinating discussion, and all of you participants for coming here, for the view maybe and the scenery, but also for gender budgeting. I wanted to recall that the Helvi Sipilä seminar has been organized annually during the high-level week of the CSW since 2006. So it is the 18th Helvi Sipilä seminar. And we're very grateful to the Finnish Federation of Graduate Women for their commitment to this concept and for their work in organizing this annual event and the event on gender budgeting today in particular. Not all of you may recall who Helvi Sipilä actually was, and many of you don't remember the nomination decisions 50 years ago. And I wanted to share some background information with you on Helvi Sipilä, after whom this seminar has been named. I think the key issue is that he was the first female Assistant Secretary General at the UN, nominated 1972. And this CSW was opened by the Secretary General, who flagged the point that gender parity has been achieved at the UN nearly. There was a figure given over 49% of UN officials being female. At the same time, of course, there's much to do still when you look at the top levels. The gender parity is not quite there yet, but the SG and the organization is working hard on this issue as well. And we have really come far from the Helvi Sipilä days, I have to say. The figure of Helvi Sipilä is remembered in Finland as a national influencer, but also very much as a UN gender activist, if I may say so. She used to work as an attorney first, not a typical job for a female lawyer or female person in Finland in those days. And she worked as a diplomat as well, and she represented Finland in the CSW in the 60s and early 70s. And she was also the chair of CSW and the vice chair. And her career was extensive also when it comes to political life. She was probably our first female presidential candidate, actually. And I think even there she was the one trying to break the glass ceiling for many to come after her. And it is a great pleasure for all of us Finnish female diplomats to continue working on the basis of her legacy. Today's topic, gender responsive budgeting, is an important concept for gender mainstreaming and improving status of women. As we have heard by many, it is also a way to ensure gender responsiveness throughout the government and governance. And I think following Helvi Sipilä's thinking, it definitely enables us to ensure that women are visible in public planning processes, and that gender equality perspective is incorporated in all policies. And I think, as Zahra said in her keynote remarks, the budgeting approach is also a very good tool because it integrates gender thinking into governance in a way that is hard to eradicate afterwards. Once it's put in there, it will usually remain part of thinking, budgeting thinking, and part of governance and part of political thinking also. Minister Grahn-Laasonen touched upon a very important topic in today's equality work, the pushback movement against gender equality, against women's and girls' rights, and against equal rights of LGBTI persons. And the pushback movement is, of course, something we constantly face here at the UN in our work and in our discussions, in our drafting exercises. And we have to continuously work against it, to fight back. But I think more importantly, and here I want to repeat what the minister has said, what the executive director of UN Women has said. Because of and despite the pushback, we also need to keep our focus on pushing forward. We need to defend what has been achieved, the acquis, of course, but also make sure that gender equality improves and moves forward. I think this must remain our goal. And here we need such tools as gender responsive budgeting and other governance tools that were mentioned today by many. Once again, thank you very much for coming, and thank you for your interest in the topic. And I hope to see many of you again here next year, the Helvi Sipilä seminar of 2025. Thank you so much. Thank you, Ambassador Kaukku, for your remarks and also for reminding us about how powerful person Helvi Sipilä was. That was important to hear. And also a warm thank to you and your staff for this wonderful venue and all the support we have received during arranging this event. And a warm thank to all our speakers, our co-hosts in the discussion, for all the specialists, and for all of you who came here. It was an excellent morning together, thinking about the structures and how we can make some concrete deeds in mainstreaming gender equality. And I wish you all a very enjoyable and learningful rest of the event, CSW 65.
And before you go,
Yes, that's correct, yeah.
And before you go, we would like to challenge you all to think about how you or your organization can promote gender responsive budgeting. In fact, now it's time to take your cell phones and put alert for 1 week from now to do so and act and make your ideas to come true. Because Helvi is watching. Helvi is watching us. And like said, earlier, we would also like to welcome you to our next Helvi Sipilä seminar, 19th Helvi Sipilä seminar. And thank you for all of you of your participation in this great day and in this great event. Thank you so much.